Welcome to Swing Left, Nebraska. We are the regional chapter of Swing Left, 100% run by grassroots volunteers dedicated to fighting for a more equitable, inclusive, and prosperous Nebraska and motivating Democratic leaning voters to vote. When we don't vote, when we don't get engaged, get involved, or stand up for what we believe in, we're effectively giving up our power. Action is the antidote. When we collaborate, work together, support each other, and our shared values, we can make our voices heard, make an impact, and inspire others to join the fight. Swing Left Nebraska offers you the information, actionable ideas, and tools you need to advocate for progressive legislation and to help elect Democratic candidates who will fight for the common good for all Nebraskans. Let's mobilize, let's take action, let's go. Hello and welcome. My name is Leah. I'm a volunteer with Swing Left Nebraska and your host. I am thrilled to have you joining Cindy, Maxwell-Ostdiek, and me today. And we want to start off by thanking you for tuning in. In this episode, we discuss the latest happenings in the Nebraska Unicameral, the legislative body that serves as the lawmaking branch of our state government. It's critical to stay informed about what's happening in our government so we can be engaged and involved citizens. We'll cover the first round of passing of 3 significant bills, including the 6-week abortion ban bill, the anti-trans bill, and the school choice bill. So, whether you're a longtime listener or a first-time listener of the Swing Left Nebraska podcast, we hope you'll find our discussion informative and engaging today. Let's do a show. Sydney, this has been a doozy of a week, to say the least. I know we say something to the effect of that every week, but this has really been a hard week with a lot of bills that are moving forward. Starting off with the abortion bill. Anti-abortion advocates are celebrating because they cleared a major legislative hurdle on Wednesday in a decades-long effort to curb what they call elective abortions or abortion by choice. So every Republican in the legislature and one Democrat, State Senator Mike McDonald of Omaha, provided the 33 votes needed to overcome a filibuster. Lawmakers gave their first round of passage to the bill 626 by a 33-16 margin. And this bill, again, as a reminder, was introduced by Senator Joni Albright of Thurston, which would outlaw abortions after a required ultrasound detects embryonic cardiac activity. That is typically at about 6 weeks before most women don't even know they're pregnant. Now, you were actually in the Capitol, in the room where this all happened. So let's bring our audience into the room if you could.
Sure. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for this podcast that you do every week and all the other podcasts. I know that I definitely want to give you a shout out to how you're helping educate all of us about these things that are happening here across the state. And you're right, this last week was very heavy. What happened the day of LB 626 was very interesting to me. I first was in the Rotunda. There was a presentation and rally by a group of faith leaders who are opponents of 626 that support choice. And it was very moving and something that I was very happy to attend. At the same time, on the outside steps of the Capitol, there was another rally supporting 626. And the thing that really struck me is that there were medical professionals there, there were priests from various religions. And to me, it seemed like the senators should listen to people who aren't necessarily their base. Some of these, when you talk about their party, or maybe their donors, or maybe their church leaders, they need to also make sure that they're representing people in their district that have different views and even different faith beliefs. I was listening to one of the rabbis from Temple Israel who was talking about how in their Jewish faith, the view of when life begins and when any sort of medical intervention would potentially take precedence over the life of a mother, that's not until they take their first breath. And so when we talk about religion and faith and how a lot of these laws are being constructed to specific religions, they're not taking into account everyone here in Nebraska. And it just is something that points out that they shouldn't be legislating based on religion anyway. We should ask our legislators to make their decisions based on science, based on expert advice, based on what is good for Nebraskans. And there are many people who are against abortion and they don't have to have one. But when you talk about taking rights away from other people who this is necessary healthcare, is it's really radical. It's really radical. And so it was a very heavy day. And in the legislature, we had so many senators trying to draw attention to the fact that the major medical organizations across the country and here in Nebraska are opposed to this abortion ban. There were many that testified in the hearing, and I think it's important to remind everyone again that the hearing structure or format was unusual or out of the norm. They restricted testimony to 3 hours for proponents and 3 hours for opponents, no matter how many people were there to testify. And Senator Kavanaugh and Senator Day actually put out a minority committee statement that listed all of the people that had testified and everyone there who wasn't able to testify. And the overwhelming majority of the people were there to oppose 626. And the medical organizations that had opposed it as well. And I just think it was really sad to listen to other senators on the floor of the legislature malign our medical professionals here in our state. I just really don't think most Nebraskans distrust our doctors. And I don't think most Nebraskans want our legislators to be on the floor of the unicameral talking about how there are neighbors and are trusted professionals in our state doing things like this out of bad intentions or for things like money. It just really was very disheartening to hear some of that debate. We had discussed this a little bit earlier offline when we talk about some of the debate on the floor and where these views from these senators are being shared. It made the news nationally, even when Senator Erdman got up to speak.
I'll go ahead and play that clip so everybody can hear it.
We have killed 2,000 babies since abortion became legal. Those are 2,000 people in the state of Nebraska that could be working and filling some of those positions that we have vacancies. They're not here. Our state population has not grown except by those foreigners who've moved here or refugees who've been placed here. Why is that? It's because we've killed 200,000 people. These are people we've killed.
His views seem to draw from the racist great replacement theory. That theory, in its pursuit and most extreme form, say that there's a conspiracy by global elites, in many versions Jews, to overwhelm Western countries with immigrants in order to outbreed and replace the white majority population and take control of those countries. Abortion is part of the theory. Extremists argue that the procedure is part of hastening of white genocide. It's been used to justify multiple white supremacist terror attacks and violence. At the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017, tiki torch wielding white supremacists chanted, "You will not replace us," and "Jews will not replace us," the day before they rioted. The murderers who massacred Jewish worshippers Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, mostly Mexican American shoppers at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas in 2019, and Black grocery shoppers in Buffalo, New York in 2022, all cited versions of this theory as reasons for their violence, as did the man who shot up the two mosques in New Zealand in 2019. This is what we're going up against. We are in a body of senators that really are coming at this from very extreme views. Also, repeated concerns that were raised during the hearing on the bill. We're saying that doctors who perform abortions and women who get abortions risk criminal penalties. Senator John Kavanaugh of Omaha and Senator Danielle Conrad of Lincoln, they are attorneys, and they raise concerns that a prosecutor might pursue a felony charge for a doctor performing an abortion outside accepted medical practices. We're having our rights ripped away from us, and the potential of medical doctors fearing for their license and actually being prosecuted.
It is very sad and discouraging because, first off, when you talk about the medical professionals, there were many there in the rotunda that day, and available to talk to senators if they had questions or wanted to speak to experts. And some of those gynecologists and OBGYNs, they had actually said, "We are here, we want to talk with you." And there were certain senators that just weren't interested. They just did not want to talk with people who were experts on this. And that's discouraging that these decisions are being made, such consequential decisions, such important decisions about people and their healthcare. When you talk about criminal prosecution, Senator Day brought a bill that would have made it very clear for our state that abortion and outcomes for pregnancies cannot be used in really prosecuting women. And for example, even like miscarriages and things, we've seen in other states where they get these abortion ban policies in place. And then it starts to be where they're searching and investigating women who've had miscarriage and trying to determine or find out or prosecute them for potentially having abortions. And so Senator Day was trying to be proactive with that and bringing a bill here at the beginning of the year. And so she was talking about it on the floor too. And I just didn't see these other senators being interested in taking that up. I don't believe they do want to protect women's from being prosecuted. They say that, but they aren't willing to build that into the actual legislation. It's
Right.
really discouraging. Another area that's a real flashpoint, and I'm going to say right off the bat, I am someone who supports everyone's bodily autonomy, and these decisions should be made by each individual. I believe that my freedom to decide about my healthcare with my doctor and my family, my reproductive choices are not things that the unicameral should be legislating. Okay. That's period where I'm at. But they're talking about a bill that would have exceptions in cases for the life of the mother. And we can go into, and there's a whole bunch of information out there about how that's working in other states. But they also have exceptions for rape and incest that is built into this particular LB 626. When we talked earlier about how Senator Kavanaugh has been trying to understand how this legislation will work in cases where someone is seeking an abortion, they need this health care because they've been raped, or in cases of incest. And Senator Albrecht is not clear about it and keeps saying that it just will be the same as it always has been. It's actually necessarily not true. Because, there is flaws in this new law she's trying to pass. And how would it work? And the doctors will be the ones in the middle needed to protect their license, right? And potential criminal exposure regarding abortion. And the senators that are trying to say there will be these exceptions before someone even knows they're pregnant at 6 weeks, if it would be later, where's this information kept? What's the procedure for that? And the thing that is very concerning to me is that we're going to put doctors in a position to maintain this information as well as to make determination based on it. And that's not fair to doctors, first off. Secondly, this information is very concerning when you talk about cases of, say, sexual assault or domestic abuse. There are some women who have abortions that will be concerned to go to their doctor and have to give these reasons because it could be something that will be very dangerous for them in their home situation or their relationships. And I just feel like the senators are not taking into account that there are many women or people that are raped or sexually assaulted that do not tell anybody, not just not go to the police and file a report. Some don't tell anybody about this. This will be very traumatizing for a lot of women who are pregnant against their will. Then, when you listen to the senators also talk about how this particular bill is for 6 weeks, and then you have Senator Reapy, who has an amendment he introduced that would have taken it to 12 weeks, but he didn't have the exception built in regarding rape. And one of the reasons he gave is he thought too many women would be making accusations of rape so they could have an abortion, and that would be difficult for all the additional men that would be facing these charges. It's barbaric what we're looking at here. And I know that there were so many people there that day in the balconies. The through line for me regarding one thing about this whole session and how the legislature is functioning is to limit our voice from the second house. The testimony was limited for the hearing on this bill. It's debated on the floor of the legislature, and people come to the balcony to watch the unicameral and their senators debate this. And the red coats is what we call them, the sergeants at arms, were given instructions that day to have one balcony for opponents and another balcony for proponents. I haven't seen that before. I've been able to go to the legislature and sit on whichever balcony, sometimes right next to a person who is in a different position than me on the bill that's being considered. And so I was very frustrated because there were a number of us there as opponents, and there was a line to get into the balcony to watch the senators debate 626 because the balcony was full. There was a sign on the door that said opponents. I think the staff at the legislature are amazing. And this was something that they were instructed to do. It wasn't the person at that door making the decision about whether we could go in or not. They were following their instructions. And I said, I'll just go over to the other balcony. And he's no. I said, but the other balcony's not full, because I poked my head in and looked, there were plenty of seats on the proponent, quote unquote, side. And no, there were instructions about where you could sit. And the opponent's balcony was full. And we all had to wait in line until someone left and opened up a seat. And I have a picture of me and one of the gals who lives here in District 4 with me. We were waiting there for quite some time before we could
Wow.
get in. And so that was very frustrating that our voice is being limited, because being there to observe and witness from the balcony is something the senators should understand, where Nebraskans, where we're coming down on this, what we feel, what we think. I know after the vote, there were a lot of people that were very upset and went to the Rotunda, some cheering for senators that had voted no for cloture. That's the important vote. That's the one that ends debate and overcomes the filibuster. And there were 33 votes for cloture. Every Republican, as well as Democrat Senator Mike McDonald, voted for cloture. And so the other 16 senators, people in the Rotunda, were there to date for voting no, or I think they all voted no, or maybe they were present not voting. And as we were there, there was someone who really was overcome with his emotion as far as wanting to make sure and let everyone know how strongly we felt about this. And he started chanting, and people joined in. One of the chants that was led was ban guns, not bodies. Ban guns, not bodies. And there were so many people that were joining in with this. The chorus of it was so loud and it echoes in the Rotunda. The sergeant at arms for the vestibule leading into the chamber actually shut the outer doors.
That's not something that's ever been done before.
Yeah, this is not done. And I will have to say the doors are beautiful. I've never seen them shut, and they're actually very ornate and beautiful. But it was so frustrating to see them shut those doors and block the senators from the second house. And I know during further debate, because the bill that came afterwards was being discussed, they didn't leave. That wasn't the end of the session that night. They had more business on the floor. And I think Senator Danielle Conrad also spoke to how unprecedented that was. And I just think that these senators need to understand that very many constituents they're not listening to because they aren't their voters, they aren't their base, they aren't their donors. And there are going to be people for in our state by these decisions. They're very serious and they should be listening to all of us, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable. I was there on the Rotunda talking with some people for a while. And at a certain point, all the Republican senators came out and Governor Pullen was there and they had a picture, kind of celebration type of picture in the Rotunda. And I just really don't know where there will be any votes to change anyone's mind on that. So I think that it's important to ask everybody to please call their senator and get everyone else they can muster to call their senator and let them know that's not what the majority of Nebraskans want.
And do we know when the next round of debate is? Has that been scheduled yet?
No, Monday's agenda is up already. So Speaker Arch is in charge of the schedule. Usually the agenda is not posted until the night before, but Monday's agenda for April 17th is up on the website already. And they're going to continue discussion on the Department of Health and Human Services. It's HHS's priority bill. They'll continue discussion on that. And then out of the bill next is 254, which is Senator Brewer's regarding digital access, the Internet Archive of the video coverage of the legislature, which I'm personally excited that they will hopefully pass. And then they have their senator priority bills throughout the day. It just seems like there's a big question how many they'll even move through on Monday because of the filibuster or just regular debate. So I don't see 626. I don't see some of these other bills for Monday anyway. Seems like a surprise when we hear when things will be up for debate.
And will this be the last round of the debate, or how many rounds of debate will there be for this bill?
There'll be three. This was the first round from general file that they advanced, and then there'll be two more rounds. The second round is 4 hours of debate, and the third round is two.
Okay. As a reminder that there is still time to contact your senator, consider reaching out to Senator McDonald and calling, emailing, leaving a voicemail, writing a letter. I will drop the link for the Nebraska legislator website in the show notes so you can easily find the contact information for your senator and the contact information for Senator McDonald.
I think it's important to also go to the legislature if you can.
Yes.
Senator Hunt talked about this last year, even during the summer when there might have been a special session. And she said, we need to flood the Capitol and be in the hallways and talking with our senators and trying to let them know how important this is to us. And I think it's important, if possible, for as many of us to go to the Capitol as we can. Now, I know people have work and school and daycare and any number of reasons why it's difficult to travel even to the Capitol. But if you can and be there and witness and make sure to let the senators know that this is something that we're paying attention to. And I think some senators should understand as well that going forward, a vote on this will affect their votes as far as reelection for whether that's in the legislature or even other capacities. So I just think that the more people we can bring out to speak on this is the best.
Yes, absolutely. Pivoting over to another bill that advanced, lawmakers narrowly advanced the trans health bill after internal chaos.
Mhm.
Legislator paused for about 45 minutes to determine the next steps amid uncertainty on an olive branch amendment. So it sounds like some chaos erupted on the floor of the Nebraska legislature. This was on Thursday after a last minute effort to consider an olive branch amendment on a bill to restrict some gender affirming care for minors. Senator Kathleen Kauth of Omaha was the one who introduced 574. And this bill would restrict puberty blockers, hormone therapies for minors. And she put out an amendment, which she described as an olive branch that would have restricted only surgeries. However, senators voted 11 to 28 against the amendment at Koth's request. Also, all 32 legislators and again, State Senator Mike McDonald of Omaha, a Democrat, voted 33 to 16 to end the debate and to advance LB 574 after Koth committed to negotiating a final reading amendment. Now, you were also in the room where it happened when this chaos erupted. Tell us about that.
Where to start. And again, I was there that day, and I will say I wasn't able to go in the morning to debate on 574, but I was listening in the car on my way to Lincoln. And when I got there, I was surprised to see that the street in front of the Capitol was closed off for a few lanes, and there were barricades and police cars and trooper cars to protect the demonstration that was going on by the Westboro Baptist Church. They were there on the steps of the Capitol, and there were like 8 people, and they had just horrific signs that they were displaying. And I did not see support for this church. I didn't see people there in front of the Capitol. I was very glad on the opposite side of the street to see so many people there demonstrating pride for our transgender youth and families. And it was just really heartening to see people there peacefully demonstrating against the hate from the Westboro Baptist Church that had come to the Capitol in support of Senator Powell's 574. It's called the Let Them Grow Act, but what it is, it restricts healthcare only for transgender youth. It's gender affirming care that if it was a cisgender child, they could access it, but it would be restricted if you were transgender. So it's really targeting a very vulnerable group of kids in our state. And unfortunately, the senators that co sponsored and introduced and voted for this bill now twice, they're supported by such groups as the Westboro Baptist Church. I know a lot of people might not be familiar with them, but it's a hate organization. It's actually designated as a hate group and organization by the Southern Poverty Law Center. It was interesting to me to hear Senator Kavanaugh reading more details about how this group also demonstrates against military funerals and Sandy Hook funerals for children that are murdered in these horrific ways. And I just think that it's important for everyday Nebraskans to understand this legislation is supported by a hate group.
You are putting out a bill, and the support you get is the Westboro Baptist Church. If that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what will at this point.
And so all day, again, we have the second straight day of intense and misinformation being shared on the floor of our legislature. And all of that and disinformation is now part of the official record for our legislature. It will be in the transcripts. And it's very disheartening to hear so many senators that were maligning our medical professionals in Nebraska. And just like with 626, the major credible medical organizations are opposed to these transgender healthcare bans. The Nebraska Medical Association, the Nurse Association, all of these different organizations are on record as opposing this legislation. And the senators like to say that the State Board of Health supports it. But again, that organization is 17 members that are appointed by the governor. And they include, and this is a good thing, I'm not saying it's bad to have a veterinarian or like an engineer on the board. I think it's important for public health that we have these various experts, but it's ideological, it's political, the people that are appointed, and the people on this State Board of Health are clearly opposing the medical community in Nebraska on this. And I think it's important that everyone really understand that. The pediatricians in Nebraska, who we all trust to take our kids to the doctor, right? We trust these professionals with our kids' health. They're telling us that this ban is bad. So I trust doctors and really wish that the senators would as well. There were doctors there willing and available to talk with any senator that might wish to have questions. I didn't really see very many senators taking advantage of that. One of the people that was there and I had seen during testimony was leaving. I asked him a couple questions. And one thing that was very interesting when we're hearing so many people considering leaving the state, there are parents that are considering moving so that they can protect their child's health care and fleeing Nebraska. And this particular person has already had two patients, families that have moved. They already moved because this is even up for debate.
Wow.
And I think it's important that people consider that in our state, we have people that are scared for their family's safety. They're scared for their child's health. We're seeing people to flee if this passes. And I've asked the question of people in general, and I did on Twitter the other day too. And there's so many people that have been telling me, and I have people calling and trying to reach out. I know people who have started their job search to leave. I know people who have been preparing their house for sale and they're researching which states will be safe for their family. And on a fundamental level, I think most Nebraskans of good conscience realize that if that's what the legislature is doing, that's not right. We had people even in the balconies, in the rotunda, in the hallways during testimony. Again, people were restricted from testifying because the committee hearing was cut short. I did not notice as many people on the balcony, so it was open. I was able to sit and observe the floor of the legislature the other day. So that was a good thing. But there were so many young people and parents in the balcony that were distraught, just terrified and crying. And I cried at a moment or two as well. I had a friend send me a picture from a local newscast that showed a picture of two of us in the balcony and we're crying, which I didn't realize that they were taking pictures of us for the news just from
Mm,
across the legislature. I think it's really important for everyday Nebraskans to just sit with this for a moment and consider that it's not normal for our unicameral to be considering legislation that people are so scared and terrified at that they're sitting in the balcony crying.
yeah.
This is not normal. This is not good policy. This is hateful legislation. And you can have disagreement about taxes or regulations about how something has to be constructed for safety or bridges or any number of things. And you can have people have strong disagreement about it, passionate disagreement about it. But when you're talking about legislation where families are coming to the legislature and watching their votes, they're watching the senators vote for something that will hurt their family, and they're so terrified, they're considering leaving the state and they're crying. That's not what Nebraska wants. The majority of Nebraskans would not want our neighbors to be hurt like this. That's just very upsetting to me. And the chaos that happened that afternoon was also alarming because the full bill has been heard and filibustered to this point. And there had, you mentioned about that amendment, when Senator Hunt withdrew her block motions, her motions that were to recommit or definitely postpone, those types of things, she removed all those motions so that Senator Cows could move forward with the quote unquote compromise amendment. There was some confusion about which amendment was being pulled, but she immediately withdrew an amendment and said that she had the votes to move forward with the bill as written and was basically rejecting quote unquote this olive branch. And there was a lot of just shocked faces, and people on the floor of the legislature immediately started gathering with each other and talking and going into different groups and clustering. And Senator Speaker Arch called for the floor of the legislature for everyone to stand at ease for 15 minutes. And then Senator Conrad made a motion after that to take a 30-minute recess. And Speaker Arch's comments when they came back to the floor really shocked me because it seemed like he did that pause to help Senator Cowth understand the ramifications for the amendments and was trying to make sure to save this bill. And I don't know how the votes would have went. It's possible that they would have still voted the very same as they did for cloture. But it just seemed odd to me that the speaker would go to such lengths to make sure to try to have this bill pass to the next round.
It's just a demonstration of the overreach of the majority power, just using the power they have in such a unfair and destructive way is what it sounds like to me.
I think that the rules of the legislature allow for moments to stand at ease and for brief recesses. That's not necessarily against the rules. It just seems that the way it all went down, it is possible. There might have been votes that were in question. And that's just sad to me that we didn't have the opportunity. If there were votes in question at that moment, we should have went ahead and held the votes and potentially we could have killed this bill. But no, we're moving forward to the next round. These families are still terrified. These children are still seeing this in the news that the Nebraska legislature is trying to vote to take away their health care. They've had so much coverage of this, but I will say to anybody listening today, the organizations that take calls for these children in crisis, these families that are facing just mental distress over this, the calls have spiked in our state because of this legislation. When this bill was introduced, when the actual bill was forwarded out of committee, calls to these hotlines have spiked in our state. This is what's happening.
It's real life. It's the real impact of these people. I wish these legislators could actually hear these calls of these parents.
Yeah, the legislators have. Some of them, I watched one family that was visiting with senators, more than one, and they do hear these stories, but they're just choosing to either not believe them or they don't care, or they are possibly not supporting this legislation, but they don't feel like they can vote against it because of other political reasons, which is cowardice. So, which of these options is worse? I don't know. It's the same impact. So, I do know that there's a lot of discussion about this amendment that would have restricted surgery, gender affirming healthcare. And that's where some of the senators they thought this was a compromise. And what was really shocking to learn, Senator Jacobson mentioned on the floor that he had talked with medical professionals. They mentioned something to the effect like that possibly there are 3 surgeries per year potentially for transgender youth. And that would be what we're talking about as top surgery. And when they say top surgery, it would be for a transgender male, someone who's assigned female at birth, but identifies as male and has potentially gone through gender affirming therapy, just supportive social presentation, and maybe had participated with puberty blocking to hold off their puberty. Maybe they were receiving hormones, but at some point, it sounds like there may be up to 3 children who would receive this breast reduction surgery, this altering surgery per year. And what I haven't been able to find out when we consider that ban is how many cisgender children in Nebraska have breast reduction surgery every year. Now, none of these surgeries would happen without parental consent. So everyone on the floor of the legislature talking about how these children are making life-altering decisions and we don't let them smoke or drink or have tattoos. Well, these are with parental consent and extreme involvement from a multidisciplinary perspective with these medical professionals. Okay. This is not willy-nilly that this is happening. And it's exceedingly rare, it sounds like, with the surgery, and definitely not anything to do with genitals. When we talk and ask, though, how many minors in Nebraska are receiving gender altering surgery with parental consent, and they will still be allowed just because they're not transgender. Now, we're talking about cisgender girls who may have either breast enhancement, which happens in Nebraska, or they might have breast reduction. That's when someone has excessive tissue, and sometimes it's like back to your back, right? Or it's difficult with sports, or for various reasons, or just to help your confidence, which is gender affirming.
Right.
There's also such cases where there are boys who have excessive breast tissue. It's called, and I don't know if I say this right, gynasty or gynecomasty. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but these boys are just experiencing excessive tissue where it can be resolved with surgery. And there are cisgender boys that have this completed. The senators were not debating disallowing all surgery on minors. They were only debating disallowing surgery on transgender minors. And that discrimination is lost on some of them. Truly, they were just willing to trade away potentially up to 3 children a year and their access to this health care that the doctors and their parents believe is necessary. So these parental rights are something that I just think most Nebraskans do not want the legislators to restrict. I think most Nebraskans believe that parents should be able to decide what is necessary regarding their child's health care. So that disinformation was really disgusting to hear. So many times we had Senator Cowles and other senators stand up and give studies, talk about things that have been debunked. I love our state and I love our unicameral and our form of government. And it makes me sad to think that there are Nebraskans listening to senators give false information. And what is the impact long term of that, right? How does that impact our state going forward? It's really damaging. It really is.
It is really damaging. So it'll be interesting to continue to follow this. I know this goes up for another round of debate that's not been determined when that is yet either. Pivoting over to LB 753, the Opportunity Scholarship Bill advanced to provide tax credits for private school scholarships. OB 753 would permit state tax credits for donations to organizations that provide scholarships to kids to attend private and parochial schools. They estimate about 5,000 students could switch to private schools, and opponents of the bill question whether LB 753 violates the state constitution, which prohibits state aid to religious institutions. And then advocates for the bill are really rallying around letting students have a choice. They betrayed the bill as a way to allow students, particularly low income kids,
Mhm.
the opportunity to attend a private school if they are not thriving in a public institution. I know you paid attention to the debate. So, what are your thoughts on this one?
There's been a revised fiscal note, and I know that there's a lot of concern from just Nebraskans across the state how this is going to impact our revenues going forward. And again, I think it's important that people understand when we're talking about school choice, we have choice in Nebraska. People can opt to different public schools. People can go to private or parochial schools at this point. Is just not with public money. The thing that a lot of the senators were talking about regarding the constitutionality of this particular bill is that, but for this legislation, those dollars would be in our state coffers. There's a real workaround with this legislation to try to avoid coming afoul of our constitution. And it's very clear Nebraska's constitution says no public dollars for parochial and religious schools. So this workaround is very convoluted, and how it would work is still a question. A lot of people are starting to try to figure out how are these scholarship granting organizations going to function? Where are they going to be? Which ones will be approved? I know Senator Kavanaugh was talking about how she might start one of them because it's a 10% administration fee that these organizations can charge based on these scholarship donations. So, that is problematic from that point. And then when you talk about the students, and I know you mentioned like there's been a figure put forward, like possibly 5,000 students who'd be able to take advantage of these dollars to apply towards a private or even parochial school. There's a limit to the amount of dollars that can apply to this tuition. That's limited to 70%. So it is difficult for some students who are maybe in a poverty or low income situation to be able to afford it still. And then we need to also be very clear that the senators voted against Senator Hunt's amendment on the last round that would have required any organization accepting this public money that they not discriminate against students or families based on LGBTQ issues, disability, etc. So I think it's really important that we stress that the senators are clear that they are okay with schools that accept these dollars discriminating against certain students and families. And I know that when we talk with people from other states have already implemented programs like this, many kids that when you say they might not be thriving in their public school, especially with disabilities or IEP plans, 504, they are rejected from these private institutions. Many of them just really don't get accepted. And I am someone who is very concerned about any children in Nebraska not thriving in their public schools. And I wish that's where the senators were focusing their priorities, that all of our children in our public schools receive everything they need. I know that the increase to special education funding is brought up a lot when they're talking about this scholarship tax credit scheme, but they're two separate issues. And we should have been fully funding special education all along. That for me is really just a non-starter when you're talking about 753. I know that there are a lot of Nebraskans who think this will help any low income family to access this program and send their kids to private school. But there are more counties in Nebraska that don't even have private schools than do. So as far as just even the ability to attend is just physically not available. I know this will hurt. And there were some Republican and rural senators even talking about how this will potentially hurt public schools in their districts too. A lot of people that think they'll be able to claim this credit on their taxes after this is passed may be too optimistic because the limit is still more for estates and trusts than are for individual tax filers or corporations. So of these initial $25 million, I believe that those $25 million will be spoken for very quickly. And that the majority of people that might want to access those dollars are just going to be too late. And the impact it would have on someone's taxes if they're not able because it's a certain portion of what your donation would be. And so the impact on your taxes would not be as amazing for most tax filers. It is dollar for dollar though, and it is something that we would be prioritizing over other charitable contributions, including to places like the food bank or to some other religious organizations or to the Red Cross and those types of things.
So here we are with another bill that will need another round of debate. Like we were saying, it was a pretty heavy week. Lots of bills that you and I have been discussing over the last few weeks came into fruition and have moved past their first round. But this doesn't mean give up hope. Like we keep stressing, keep reaching out to your senators, keep contacting them in a way that feels right to you. Contact Senator McDonald and let your voice be heard. Next week, there is a super cool event. Moral Mondays taking place on April 17th from 12 to about 1 with the Poor People's Campaign. Angelo Montalvo organized this event. If you get a chance, there was a podcast that I did. I actually interviewed her on April 4th. So check that podcast out on the Swing Left Nebraska podcast. I understand you'll be attending that. Are you looking forward to going to that?
I am. I'm looking forward to going to that. And I was also really looking forward to a couple other events like Earth Day is being celebrated in Omaha on Saturday, the 22nd. And then UNO is having a trans student walkout on April 24th, Monday at 11. So that's not this week, but maybe people can get it on their calendar for the week after to go out and support those students too.
Perfect. So, lots of things that we can still do to use our voice to push back against these egregious bills and things that are taking place in our unicameral.
Thank you. Really appreciate you. And hopefully we can encourage people to reach out to their neighbors, getting in touch with them and asking them to contact their senators too. And maybe they will hopefully listen if they hear from enough of their constituents.
Yes, it makes a big difference when you have those one on one conversations with your family members and your friends. The peer pressure thing is a real thing. And I've seen it work in my life with my close friends and family when I talk to them one on one and tell them why this is important to me and how they can get involved. It goes a long way when you can have those personal one on one interactions. So, everybody use your voice in a way that makes you feel good. and take care of yourself. Drink some water, get some sleep, take a walk, try to get some sunshine when the sun comes back out. We are all in this together. Cindy, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it today.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Swing Left Nebraska. We hope you enjoyed learning about what's happening in the Nebraska Unicameral and its impact on our state legislative process. If you want to continue to join us as we explore the world of Nebraska politics and stay informed about important events in Nebraska, as well as ways to get involved and make a difference, be sure to subscribe to our pod for free. If you're interested in getting involved in helping to elect Democrats down the ballot for the Lincoln general race on May 2nd, head to nebraskademocrats.org to sign up to volunteer or to donate. Cindy and I look forward to seeing you next week to unpack the unicameral. Together, we can work towards a more informed and engaged electorate. Let's mobilize. Let's take action. Let's go.
Ready, set, go.
Get ready to go. Get ready to go. Get ready to go. Get ready to go.